You're about to discover something that will change how you respond to every betrayal, every broken promise, every moment when someone you trusted lets you down. In the next 3 hours, you'll witness a transformation so profound that an entire village learned to trust again after being completely deceived. But here's what might shock you most. The man who healed their hearts never once mentioned forgiveness, never preached about letting go, never told anyone what they should feel. Instead, he did something so quietly revolutionary that it didn't just change minds, it changed the very nature of how people experienced life. Close your eyes now. Let your breathing slow. Feel yourself sinking into this moment between the chaos of your day and the peace you're seeking. You are safe here. You are exactly where you need to be. Now you find yourself standing on a dusty road in ancient India, 2,500 years ago. The earth beneath your bare feet crumbles like warm powder. Above you, the sky burns gold with late afternoon light. The air carries the scent of distant cooking fires and jasmine blooming wild along the roadside. You're not alone. Ahead of you walks a figure that seems to move differently than everyone else you've ever encountered. His steps don't rush. His shoulders don't carry tension. Even the oxen pulling his simple cart seem calmer in his presence. His name is Sucha, though you don't know this yet. What you do know, what you can feel in your bones, is that you're about to witness something extraordinary. Something that will give you a new way to handle every difficult person, every painful disappointment, every moment when life breaks your trust. But first, you need to walk this road. You need to feel what's coming. The road curves gently ahead, and with each step, you feel something shifting in the very air around you. It's subtle at first, like the way the atmosphere changes before a storm, except this feels different. Not heavy with tension, but weighted with possibility. The man you're following, Sucha, moves with a rhythm that seems to slow time itself. His oxen match his pace, their bells chiming softly, in a pattern that makes your heartbeat want to synchronize. You've never seen anyone walk like this before, as if each step is both a prayer and an answer. But something else catches your attention now. The closer you get to the village ahead, the more you notice what's missing. There are no children running out to greet travelers. No curious faces peering from doorways. No merchants calling out their wares or elders, offering blessings to those on the road. Instead, there's a quality to the silence that feels almost protective, like a village holding its breath. You pass a woman carrying water from a distant well. She glances at Sucha's cart, and for just a moment, her eyes light up, then quickly dim. She hurries past without a word, clutching her clay pot closer to her chest. You see a man mending his roof pause in his work, hammer raised, watching the approaching cart with an expression you recognize from your own life. It's the look of someone who wants to hope, but is afraid to. The look of someone who's been burned at work by a boss who promised raises that never came. Someone who's tired of getting excited only to be let down. This is what betrayal does to a community. It doesn't just break individual hearts, it fractures the very fabric of trust that holds people together. You can feel it in your own chest now, that familiar tightness that comes when you've learned to be careful. When you've discovered that not everyone who smiles at the office party actually has your back. When you've realized that some people see your kindness as weakness to exploit. When you've learned that being genuine sometimes gets you hurt. But Sucha seems untouched by their wariness. He doesn't quicken his pace or slow it down, doesn't adjust his expression or try to appear more trustworthy. He simply continues being exactly who he is. And there's something profoundly radical about this. In a world where most of us shapeshift constantly, trying to be what our boss wants, what our family expects, what will keep us safe, here is someone who remains utterly himself. The Buddha once taught, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. And watching Sucha, you begin to understand what this really means. As you enter the village proper, you notice more details that tell the story of what happened here. A pile of broken pottery sits beside one house, the pieces too shattered to mend. It reminds you of your own broken pieces, the shattered trust after a friend betrayed your confidence, the cracked confidence after a relationship ended badly. Fabric hangs on a line, but it's stained with colors that bled and ran when they shouldn't have. You catch fragments of hushed conversations, never again, and should have known better, and too good to be true. These are the same words you've whispered to yourself after disappointment. This place has learned to doubt its own judgment. And nothing hurts quite like losing faith in your ability to tell good from evil, honest from fake, safe from dangerous. The villagers move differently than people in happy places. Their shoulders are tighter. Their smiles, when they come, don't quite reach their eyes. A mother calls her child inside when she sees strangers approaching. An old man who might normally offer water to travelers keeps his head down, sweeping the same patch of ground over and over. You recognize this behavior. It's the same way you act when you're protecting yourself from being hurt again. When you've put up invisible walls that say, "I'm not available for disappointment today." But here's what makes Sucha different from every other person you've ever known. He doesn't take their caution personally. He doesn't get defensive or try to prove he's different. He doesn't launch into explanations about his character or past successes. In fact, he does something that seems almost impossible in our world of constant self-promotion and personal branding. He lets their suspicion exist without trying to change it. He allows their fear without taking responsibility for healing it. He simply is who he is and trusts that truth will speak for itself. This is the first profound lesson you're witnessing. The Zen teaching that true strength comes not from forcing others to see us differently, but from remaining unchanged by their misperceptions. The Buddha taught, you will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. And Sucha understands this deeply. He knows that becoming angry at their distrust would only create more distrust. That defending himself against their suspicion would only feed their suspicion. Instead, he chooses something revolutionary, He chooses to remain at peace, regardless of how others perceive him. Sucha guides his oxen to a stop near the village well. The well is ancient, its stones worn smooth by countless hands drawing water, countless prayers whispered into its depths. It's the kind of place where communities gather, where news is shared, where life unfolds in the simple rhythm of daily needs. But today it sits mostly empty, like a heart that's learned to be careful about who it opens to. And then he does something that stops you in your tracks. Something so simple yet so powerful that it will change how you handle every difficult situation for the rest of your life. He doesn't immediately unpack his wares, doesn't call out announcements or try to attract attention, doesn't launch into a sales pitch or start explaining why he's different from the last merchant. Instead, he simply sits down, cross-legged on the dusty ground, hands resting gently in his lap, eyes soft but alert. Just sits and waits. In our world of constant motion, of endless networking and proving and pushing for results, this simple act feels almost revolutionary. When was the last time you entered a tense situation and didn't immediately try to fix it? When did you last meet suspicion without defending yourself? When have you ever responded to distrust by simply being present, without agenda, without need to change anyone's mind? This is what the Zen masters call beginner's mind, approaching each moment fresh, without the burden of needing to prove anything. You settle beside him, feeling the warm stone of the well's edge beneath you. From this vantage point, you can see the entire village square. A blacksmith works his forge, but his hammer strikes seem harder than necessary, like he's beating out more than just metal. A mother calls her children inside earlier than usual, her voice tight with protective worry. An elder sweeps the same patch of ground over and over, his movements sharp with the kind of agitation that comes from feeling helpless. This is a community in pain, and pain makes people careful, sometimes too careful to let healing in. But as you sit in the growing quiet, something begins to shift. It's almost imperceptible at first, like the way shadows change as clouds move across the sun. A child peeks around the corner of a house, curious about the man by the well who isn't trying to sell anything. You watch her small face, round with wonder at this stranger who sits so still. She's never seen an adult who wasn't rushing towards something or away from something. A woman slows her hurried pace just slightly as she passes, glancing sideways at this merchant who seems to have all the time in the world. An old man stops pretending to be busy and allows himself to simply observe. There's something about Sucha's stillness that gives them permission to be curious instead of afraid. Here's what you're witnessing that most people never get to see: the incredible power of non-reactive presence. In Zen Buddhism, this is called non-attachment, not being pulled around by other people's emotions or expectations. When someone is angry, you don't have to become angry. When someone is suspicious, you don't have to become defensive. When someone is hurt, you don't have to fix them. You can simply be present, like a mountain that remains unchanged, whether the weather is stormy or clear. There's something magnetic about genuine stillness. In a world full of people trying to get something from you, your attention, your money, your approval, your validation on social media, encountering someone who wants nothing is like finding clean air in a polluted city. It draws you in not because it demands your presence, but because it offers space for you to simply exist without performance. Think about the people in your own life who make you feel most peaceful. They're probably not the ones who are always trying to impress you or convince you of something. They're the ones who are comfortable with silence, who don't need you to be different than you are. This is the first lesson Sucha offers, without speaking a single word. That healing begins not with action, but with presence. Not with doing, but with being. Not with trying to fix what's broken, but with creating space for brokenness to be seen and acknowledged without judgment. The Buddha taught, if you want to know your mind, sit in meditation for 5 minutes. But Sucha is showing something even deeper. If you want to heal a wounded community, sit with them in their pain without trying to take it away. The sun moves lower in the sky, painting the village in shades of gold and amber. Cooking fires begin to bloom like small stars as families prepare their evening meals. The sounds of daily life continue around you, voices calling, tools working, life persisting despite disappointment. Children's laughter echoes from somewhere behind the houses, proving that joy still exists here, just hidden. But there's a new quality to the evening air, a sense that something is about to shift. That change is coming, not with thunder and lightning, but with the gentle persistence of water wearing down stone. You watch Sucha from the corner of your eye. His breathing is steady and deep, like someone who has learned to find peace, even in uncertainty. His posture relaxed but alert, like a cat resting in the sun but aware of every movement around it. There's no fidgeting, no checking imaginary timepieces, no impatience, no agenda pushing against the natural flow of time. This is someone who has learned what the Zen masters call Buddha nature, the understanding that you are already complete, already worthy, already enough, without needing to prove anything to anyone. And you realize something that makes your heart skip with recognition. You're not just witnessing this story, you're living it. Every moment of resistance you feel to simply sitting here, every urge to check your phone or think about tomorrow's problems, every whisper of anxiety about time being wasted, these are the same forces that keep you trapped in cycles of stress and dissatisfaction. But here, in this ancient moment, you're learning a different way, a way that might just change everything about how you meet life's challenges, a way that could transform your relationships, your work stress, your response to disappointment. The Buddha once said, "Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding." And Sucha embodies this teaching perfectly. He's not trying to force the villagers to trust him. He's not using clever words or special techniques to win them over. He's simply understanding that their suspicion is natural, their caution is reasonable, their hurt is valid. And in that understanding, space opens for something new to grow. A small commotion draws your attention. An old woman has dropped her basket, and clay pots have scattered across the ground. 2 have cracked, and you can see the disappointment flood her weathered face. Without thinking, Sucha rises smoothly and walks over to help. But he doesn't just pick up the pieces. He examines each broken pot carefully, turning the fragments in his hands. "These pieces," he says softly to the woman, "they remember the shape they used to hold. Perhaps they're ready to become something new." The woman stares at him, confusion and curiosity warring in her expression. This is your first glimpse of how transformation really works. Not by pretending the breaking never happened, but by honoring what was broken and seeing what new form it might take. Not by rushing to fix or replace, but by recognizing that sometimes things need to break before they can become what they're truly meant to be. The woman doesn't respond with words, but something shifts in her posture. A tiny opening, like the first crack in ice that signals spring is coming. As Sucha returns to his place by the well, you notice that more eyes are watching now. Not with suspicion exactly, but with puzzlement. This merchant doesn't act like merchants are supposed to act. He doesn't seem to want anything from them. And in a world where everyone wants something, this absence of agenda is more compelling than any sales pitch could ever be. The first stars begin to appear in the deepening sky. Soon, someone will approach. Someone will test this merchant's patience, his honesty, his heart. Someone will bring their brokenness to this quiet man by the well. And in that meeting, both the giver and receiver will discover something beautiful. Something that will ripple out through this village and across centuries. Something that's about to change how you see every difficult relationship in your own life. Every challenging conversation, every moment when trust hangs in the balance, every opportunity to choose between defending yourself and simply being present. But for now, you sit in the gathering dusk, learning the revolutionary art of being present without agenda, of meeting suspicion with stillness, of responding to hurt not with hurt, but with an openness so radical it transforms everything it touches. This is where your own healing begins. Right here, in this ancient lesson about the power of simply being yourself, completely and without apology, regardless of how others might judge or misunderstand. The night is coming, and with it, the first tentative steps toward trust. But those steps will be taken not because Sucha convinced anyone of anything. They'll be taken because he created space for people to remember who they really are, underneath their fear. The darkness deepens around the village square, but it's not the heavy darkness of fear. It's the soft darkness of evening settling like a gentle blanket over tired souls. Oil lamps begin to flicker in windows, casting warm golden rectangles of light onto the dusty paths. You can smell rice cooking, hear the low murmur of families gathering for their evening meal. Life continues its ancient rhythm, but something new is stirring. Something that started the moment Sucha chose to sit by the well instead of shouting his wares. You watch as a small figure detaches itself from the shadows near a cluster of houses. It's a child, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with dirt-smudged cheeks and eyes that seem too old for her young face. She moves like someone who's learned to be careful, to test each step before committing her full weight. This is Mira, though you don't know her name yet. What you do know is that she carries something in her small hands, a chipped clay cup that looks like it's seen better days. She approaches the well slowly, stopping just out of arm's reach from where Sucha sits. For a long moment, she simply stares at him. Children have a way of seeing things that adults miss. They haven't yet learned to put on masks or pretend they feel differently than they do. This little girl is studying Sucha the way you might study a painting in a museum, trying to understand what makes it different from all the others. "Are you the merchant who sells lies?" she asks, suddenly, her voice clear in the evening air. The question hangs between them like a bridge, waiting to be crossed. You feel your own breath catch. This is the moment that will determine everything. How he responds to this child's directness, her raw honesty, born from recent hurt, will set the tone for everything that follows. Sucha doesn't flinch, doesn't look offended, or rush to defend himself. Instead, he tilts his head slightly, as if considering her question with the same seriousness he might give to a scholar's philosophical inquiry. "I sell what I have," he says simply, "and I have no lies to sell." The answer is so straightforward, so free of defensiveness or manipulation, that it stops you in your tracks. When was the last time someone responded to your suspicion with such calm honesty? When did someone last meet your doubt without trying to convince you otherwise? Mira shifts the cup from one hand to the other. "The last merchant said that too," she replies. "He said he only sold true things. But his pots cracked after one day, and his cloth made my mother's hands itch." Her words carry the weight of betrayal, but also something else, the desperate hope that maybe this time will be different. You recognize this feeling from your own life. The cautious hope you feel when someone new enters your world. The part of you that wants to believe in goodness even after you've been hurt. "Then you've learned something valuable," Sucha says, and his voice carries no condescension, no adult talking down to a child. "You've learned to ask questions. Questions are more precious than any goods I carry." He gestures to the space beside him. "Would you like to sit while you ask them?" This is where you witness something extraordinary. Instead of trying to win the child's trust through gifts or sweet words, Sucha honors her intelligence. He validates her skepticism instead of trying to overcome it. The Buddha taught, 3 things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. And Sucha trusts this teaching completely. He knows that truth doesn't need to be defended or sold. It only needs to be lived. Mira considers his invitation. You can see the internal struggle playing out on her young face. The part of her that wants to trust warring with the part that's learned to be careful. Finally, she takes a small step closer, though she remains standing. "What's in your cart?" she asks. "Would you like to see?" Sucha asks. But he doesn't move to show her, doesn't start unpacking to display his wares. He simply offers the choice and waits for her response. This is what respect looks like, giving someone the power to choose their level of engagement without pressure or manipulation. Mira nods, and together you watch as Sucha rises slowly and walks to his cart. He doesn't throw back the covering with flourish or dramatic reveal. Instead, he lifts one corner gently, as if unveiling something sacred. Inside, you see simple things: clay bowls, wooden spoons, lengths of undyed cloth, small jars of what might be oil or honey. Nothing flashy or expensive. Nothing that promises to change your life or solve all your problems. Just honest, useful things made by honest hands. They're so plain, Mira observes, and there's no judgment in her voice, just curiosity. The other merchant had things that sparkled and shined. Yes, Sucha agrees. Beautiful things can sometimes hide ugly truths. Plain things have nowhere to hide. You see exactly what they are. He picks up one of the bowls and holds it out to her. This bowl makes no promises except to hold what you put in it. It won't make your food taste better or your water cleaner, but it won't lie to you either. This is a profound teaching about authenticity. In our world of social media filters and personal branding, of resumes that embellish and dating profiles that exaggerate, here's someone offering plain truth. No enhancement, no marketing spin, no attempt to be more impressive than reality. Just honest presentation of what is. And somehow, this honesty is more compelling than any advertisement could ever be. Mira reaches out tentatively and takes the bowl. It's heavier than she expected. You can tell by the way. She adjusts her grip. She turns it over in her small hands, examining it from every angle. "How do I know it won't crack like the others?" she asks. "You don't," Sucha says simply. "All things break eventually. But this one will break from use, not from lies." He sits back down by the well. The difference is in the making. This bowl was fired slowly, patiently. It was allowed to become what it truly is, instead of being forced into something it's not. You feel something shift inside your chest at these words. How often do you try to force yourself into shapes that don't fit? How much energy do you spend trying to be what others expect, instead of what you truly are? Sucha is teaching the deepest lesson of Zen Buddhism, without using any Buddhist terms, that authenticity is not just more honest, it's actually stronger. When you stop pretending to be something you're not, you discover the unshakable strength of simply being yourself. Mira sits down now, cross-legged like Sucha, still holding the bowl. "Are you a good person?" she asks, with the devastating directness that only children possess. The question slices through all pretense, all social nicety, straight to the heart of what really matters. Sucha is quiet for a long moment, not because he doesn't know the answer, but because he's considering how to give a truthful response to such an important question. "I try to be," he finally says. "Some days I succeed better than others, but I have stopped trying to be perfect, and that has made me more honest." This answer stops you cold. When was the last time someone answered your question about their character with such undefended honesty? No boasting, no false humility, no attempt to impress. Just the simple truth that goodness is a practice, not a permanent state. That authenticity means acknowledging your struggles instead of hiding them. My mother says good people get taken advantage of, Mira says, and you hear the echo of protective wisdom passed down from parent to child. The kind of warning that comes from experience, from being hurt by people who mistook kindness for weakness. Your mother is wise to teach you to be careful, Sucha replies. But there's a difference between being good and being foolish. Good people can learn to be wise. They can be kind without being naive. They can trust without being blind. He looks at the bowl in her hands. That bowl is good. It's well made and honest. But it's also wise. It knows its limits. It won't try to hold fire or promises it can't keep. As they talk, you notice that other villagers have begun to emerge from their homes, not approaching directly, but finding reasons to be nearby. A woman hangs laundry on a line that gives her a clear view of the well. An old man sits on his doorstep, whittling a piece of wood but listening to every word. A teenage boy helps his father load a cart, but the work is taking much longer than necessary. They're all drawn to this strange scene, a merchant who doesn't seem to want to sell anything, talking to a child as if her questions matter more than his profit. "Can I ask you something else?" Mira says, setting the bowl carefully in her lap. "Why didn't you try to tell me I was wrong for not trusting you?" This question reveals the depth of the trauma the village has experienced. Clearly, the previous merchant didn't just sell faulty goods, he made them feel guilty for their doubt. He used their natural suspicion against them, making them question their own instincts. This is how manipulation works. It doesn't just fool you once. It makes you doubt your ability to tell truth from lies in the future. Because your doubt is a gift, Sucha says. It protects you. I would never ask you to throw away something that keeps you safe. Trust should be earned, not demanded. He picks up a small pebble and turns it over in his hands. When someone tries to convince you to trust them quickly, they're usually trying to rush past your wisdom. When someone is willing to wait for your trust, they're showing respect for your intelligence. You feel tears prick at your eyes as these words sink in. How many times have you been made to feel bad for being cautious? How often have you been told you're too suspicious or don't give people chances, when really you were just protecting yourself? Sucha is validating something essential, that your instincts matter, that your boundaries are valuable, that you have the right to take your time before opening your heart. The Buddha taught, believe nothing, no matter where you read it or who said it, unless it agrees with your own reason and your own common sense. This is exactly what Sucha is modeling. He's not asking Mira to believe him because he says she should. He's asking her to use her own wisdom, her own experience, her own judgment. A movement in your peripheral vision catches your attention. An older woman is approaching the well, walking slowly but with purpose. She carries something in her hands, another broken pot, you realize as she gets closer. Her face is weathered like old leather, but her eyes are sharp and assessing. This is clearly someone who has seen enough of life to be skeptical of easy answers. "Child," she says to Mira, her voice carrying the authority of generations, "you shouldn't talk to strangers after dark." But even as she says it, Her eyes are studying Sucha, taking his measure. There's protectiveness in her stance, but also curiosity. Mira looks up at the woman, her grandmother, you sense, and holds up the bowl. "Grandmother," he says his things don't lie. "All merchants say that," the old woman replies, but she doesn't immediately take Mira away. Instead, she steps closer to examine the bowl in the lamplight. Sucha rises respectfully as she approaches. "Good evening, grandmother," he says, using the honorific that shows respect for her age and wisdom. "Your granddaughter asks excellent questions." The old woman, Kamala is her name, though you won't learn it for a while yet, looks at him sharply. "Questions are all we have left," she says. "The last merchant who came through here made us forget how to ask them." She holds up her own broken pot. This cracked after one use. One use. I've been making pottery for 60 years, and I've never seen clay so poorly fired. "May I look at it?" Sucha asks, extending his hands. Kamala hesitates, then passes him the broken pieces. He examines them carefully, turning each fragment to catch the light. "This was fired too quickly," he says finally. "The potter was in a hurry. Rushed clay never holds." "And how do I know you're not just saying what I want to hear?" Kamala challenges. Her tone is sharp, but you sense she wants to be proven wrong. She wants to discover that not all merchants are liars, that maybe trust is still possible in this world. Instead of answering immediately, Sucha walks back to his cart and retrieves one of his own bowls. But he doesn't hand it to her. Instead, he sets it on the stone edge of the well and picks up a small rock. "If you're worried this bowl might be like the other one," he says, "test it." Both Mira and Kamala stare at him in shock. "Test it?" Kamala repeats. "You want me to break your bowl? If that's what it takes for you to trust your own judgment," Sucha replies calmly. "Good clay shouldn't break from a small impact. If this bowl can't handle a reasonable test, you shouldn't trust it with your food." This moment crystallizes everything different about Sucha's approach. Where the previous merchant probably discouraged questions and hurried transactions, Sucha is literally inviting examination. He's so confident in the quality of his goods that he's willing to risk loss rather than ask someone to trust blindly. This is what the Zen concept of non-attachment really means. He's not attached to the outcome because he trusts in the truth. He knows that authentic quality will speak for itself when tested. Kamala picks up the rock with trembling hands. You can see the conflict on her face. Part of her wants to trust. Part of her is afraid to hope. She taps the bowl gently, then with more force. It rings like a bell, clear and true. She hits it harder. The sound remains pure, no cracks appear. Finally, she sets down the rock and stares at the intact bowl in wonder. "It didn't break," Mira whispers, and you hear the amazement in her voice. "It's really strong." "Strong clay can handle honest testing," Sucha says. "It's only weak clay that needs to hide from examination." The metaphor isn't lost on anyone present. This isn't just about pottery. This is about integrity, about character, about the difference between people who can withstand scrutiny and those who need to hide from it. You think about your own life, your own relationships. The people you trust most are probably the ones who welcome your questions instead of deflecting them. The ones who are comfortable being examined because they have nothing to hide. Kamala sits down heavily on the well's edge, still staring at the unbroken bowl. 60 years, she murmurs. 60 years I've been judging pottery, and I forgot how to test it. I let smooth words and shiny surfaces fool me into thinking I didn't need to use my hands, my experience. She looks up at Sucha with something that might be the beginning of respect. You're teaching me to trust myself again. You never lost that ability, Sucha replies gently. You just temporarily forgot to use it. Wisdom doesn't disappear. Sometimes it just gets covered over by doubt. By now, more villagers have gathered around the well, drawn by the sound of voices, by the unusual sight of their most skeptical elder sitting peacefully with a stranger. A young man steps forward, holding what looks like a length of cloth. Is it true what they're saying? He asks. That you let people test your goods before buying. Word travels fast in small communities. Already, the story of the unbreakable bowl is spreading from house to house. But more than that, the story of a merchant who invited testing instead of discouraging it, who treated doubt as wisdom instead of obstacles to overcome. Test anything you like, Sucha says simply. If it's well made, testing will only prove its quality. If it's poorly made, better you should know now than after you've paid for it. The young man unfolds his damaged cloth, clearly another victim of the previous merchant's deception. The fabric is discolored, the dye having run in ugly streaks. This was supposed to be color-fast, he says bitterly. Sucha examines the ruined cloth with the same careful attention he gave, the broken pottery. The dye was set with salt water, he observes. Salt water fades quickly. True color-fast dye is set with minerals and time. He goes to his cart and brings back a small piece of his own fabric. Here, he says, handing the young man a cup of water. Wet this and see if the color runs. The young man dips the cloth in the water, then wrings it out. The water remains clear. He tries again, rubbing the wet fabric between his hands. Still no color bleeds. How? He asks. How do you make dye that holds? Time, Sucha answers. Patience. The willingness to do things right instead of fast. Good dye needs 3 days to set properly. Bad dye is rushed and seems ready in 3 hours. He looks around at the small crowd that has gathered. This is true for most things worth having. They require time to become what they're meant to be. You feel the profound truth of this statement settling into your bones. In our instant gratification world, where everything is supposed to happen quickly and easily, here's someone advocating for the slow path, the patient path, the path that honors natural timing instead of forced results. You think about your own life. The relationships that lasted were the ones that developed slowly. The skills you mastered were the ones you practiced patiently over time. The deepest truths you've learned came through experience, not quick fixes. A small commotion draws your attention to the edge of the gathering. A man is pushing through the small crowd, his face set in hard lines. This is Bandhula, the grain merchant, and his reputation for skepticism precedes him. If anyone is going to challenge Sucha's claims, it will be him. "More testing," he says loudly, his voice carrying a sneer. "More pretty demonstrations. But what happens when the testing is over and we've paid our money? What happens when you're gone and we discover the truth?" His words carry the weight of recent betrayal, the bitter wisdom of someone who trusted once and regretted it. Sucha turns to face him directly, no defensiveness in his posture. "What would satisfy you?" he asks simply. "What would convince you that my goods are what I claim them to be?" Bandhula is clearly surprised by this direct approach. He was prepared for arguments or sales pitches, not genuine questions about his concerns. I want proof that will last," he says, his certainty wavering slightly. "Not just tricks that work for a moment." "Then choose something from my cart," Sucha offers. "Take it home. Use it for a full moon cycle. If it fails or proves false in any way, bring it back. I'll return whatever you paid and give you something else of equal value as apology for wasting your time." The crowd goes silent. This is unprecedented. No merchant offers a moon cycle guarantee. No trader puts his reputation and profit at such risk. But Sucha stands calmly in the center of their shock, as peaceful as if he'd just offered someone a cup of tea. "You would do that?" Bandhula asks, his voice smaller now, less certain of his cynicism. "You would let me use something for a full month and return it if I'm not satisfied?" "I would," Sucha confirms, "because I trust both my goods and your honesty. If you return something, it will be because it truly failed, not because you're trying to cheat me." He looks around at the gathered faces. This is what real confidence looks like. When you know something is good, you're not afraid to let people discover it for themselves. The Buddha taught, in the end, these things matter most. How well did you love? How fully did you live? How deeply did you let go? Watching Sucha, you understand that letting go doesn't mean not caring. It means caring so deeply about truth and integrity that you're willing to trust them completely. Even when it's risky, even when it's unconventional, even when it might cost you money or reputation. As the evening deepens, and one by one, the villagers begin to drift back to their homes, you sit with this profound lesson. You've witnessed the beginning of transformation, not through argument or persuasion, but through demonstration. Not by telling people what to think, but by showing them it's safe to think for themselves. Not by demanding trust, but by proving worthy of it. One honest interaction at a time. The second day dawns with a quality of light that seems different from yesterday. Softer somehow, more welcoming. You wake to find Sucha already sitting by the well, But this morning he's not alone. A small circle has formed around him. Villagers who have risen early not because they need to trade, but because they want to be near this peaceful presence. The Buddha taught that better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. And in Sucha's quiet presence, you understand that sometimes the most powerful word is silence itself. You notice immediately how the atmosphere has shifted. Yesterday, people approached the well with careful steps and guarded expressions. Today, there's an ease in their movements, a readiness to smile. This is what the Buddhist concept of dependent origination looks like, how one person's authentic presence creates conditions for others to feel safe. Children play closer to the adults instead of being called inside. Conversations happen at normal volume instead of hushed whispers. It's as if the entire village has exhaled a breath it didn't know it was holding. The first rays of sunlight catch the dewdrops on the grass around the well. You watch Sucha notice these small beauties, his eyes lingering on details that most people rush past. This quality of attention is what Zen masters call mindfulness, being fully present to this moment without being pulled into past or future. This is right mindfulness from the Noble Eightfold Path, practiced not as meditation technique, but as a way of being. A young mother carrying a baby approaches, with a toddler clinging to her skirt. Her name is Priya, and you can see the story of recent struggle written in the careful way she moves. She stops at a respectful distance, bouncing the baby gently to keep him quiet. There's something in her face that speaks of sleepless nights and worried days. The kind of exhaustion that comes not just from physical labor, but from the emotional weight of protecting those you love. My husband heard what happened yesterday, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. About the testing, about the guarantee you offered. She shifts the baby to her other hip. We lost everything to the last merchant. All our savings went to medicine for our oldest son that was supposed to cure his fever. Her voice cracks slightly, but it made him worse instead. We almost lost him. The weight of her words settles over the gathering like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about broken pottery or faded cloth. Lives had been endangered by someone's greed. You feel the truth of what Buddhists call the first noble truth, that suffering is an inherent part of existence. But here, suffering isn't abstract philosophy. It's a parent's terror watching a child slip away because of medicine that promised healing but delivered harm. The betrayal cut deeper than mere disappointment. It struck at the very heart of a parent's love and responsibility. Sucha listens without interrupting, his presence steady as a mountain. This is what Zen calls just sitting, being completely present without agenda, without need to fix or change or improve. When she finishes, he doesn't immediately offer solutions or make promises. Instead, he asks a simple question that shows he was truly listening. How is your son now? This is right speech from the Eightfold Path, words that heal rather than harm, that seek understanding rather than self-promotion. Better, Priya says, and for the first time her face softens with relief. The village healer gave us proper medicine, real herbs that actually helped. You can see gratitude flowing through her like water through drought-cracked earth. But we have no money left to pay her what we owe. She looks down at the baby in her arms. I came to ask if you trade for things other than coins. This question reveals something beautiful about the Buddhist understanding of right livelihood. Even after being betrayed, even after losing everything, this mother is seeking honest ways to pay her debts. She's not asking for charity or pity. She's asking for the opportunity to participate in what the Buddha called right exchange, trade that honors the dignity of all parties. This embodies dana, the practice of giving, not as one-way charity, but as recognition that we all have gifts to offer. What do you have to offer? Sucha asks, and there's no judgment in his voice. No assumption that someone without money has nothing of value. This question embodies the Zen principle that everyone possesses Buddha nature, the inherent capacity for awakening, for contributing something meaningful to the world. Priya hesitates, then reaches into her bundle and pulls out a piece of embroidered cloth. The work is exquisite, tiny, perfect stitches forming patterns that seem to dance in the morning light. I sew, she says simply. It's all I know how to do well. The humility in her voice carries the weight of conditioning, how society teaches us to diminish our gifts. But what she's holding is a manifestation of what Zen calls beginner's mind, approaching each stitch with fresh attention and care. Sucha takes the cloth gently, examining it with the same careful attention he gave the broken pottery yesterday. This is what mindful appreciation looks like, seeing not just the object, but the love invested in its creation. This is beautiful work, he says, genuine appreciation in his voice. How long did this piece take you? He's asking not to calculate time cost efficiency, but to honor the meditation that went into each stitch. 3 evenings, Priya admits. Working by lamplight after the children were asleep. She looks down at her work-roughened hands. I know it's not much, but it's what I can do. Here is the conditioning of a world that measures worth by market value rather than heart value. Not much? Sucha repeats, his voice carrying gentle surprise. This represents 3 evenings of your life. 3 evenings when you could have been resting, but instead you chose to create something beautiful. He holds up the embroidery to catch the light. The Buddha taught, if you truly loved yourself, you would never hurt another. Your work shows that love for beauty, love for the person who will receive this, love for the act of creation itself. He looks directly at her. This shows patience, skill, dedication. These are expressions of Buddha nature, made visible. You watch Priya's face transform as his words sink in. She stands a little straighter, holds her children a little less protectively. Someone has just seen her worth, not as a customer, but as a human being expressing her essential nature through skillful means. The Buddha taught that thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. This is what you're witnessing, joy growing through recognition of inherent human dignity. What would help your family? Sucha asks. Not what you can afford, but what you actually need. This distinction embodies the Buddhist principle of right intention, acting from wisdom and compassion, rather than greed or fear. He's shifting the conversation from scarcity consciousness to abundance consciousness. We need oil for cooking, Priya says tentatively, and perhaps a good knife for my husband's work. She pauses, old conditioning reasserting itself. But those things are worth more than my sewing. Who taught you that your work is worth less than objects? Sucha asks gently. Your embroidery required right effort, one of the Buddha's eightfold path. It shows right concentration in every perfect stitch. It demonstrates right mindfulness in its attention to detail. He turns the embroidery in the light. This pattern exists nowhere else in the world. You imagined it and brought it into being. How do you put a price on creation itself? This teaching goes to the heart of Buddhist economics, understanding that true value lies not in scarcity or market demand, but in the Dharma qualities invested in creation. Right livelihood means engaging in work that doesn't harm others and allows us to express our Buddha nature. Priya's embroidery is right livelihood made manifest. From his cart, Sucha retrieves a clay jar of oil and a well-made knife. He sets them on the well's edge, alongside Priya's embroidery. Fair exchange, he says simply. Care for care, mindfulness for mindfulness, Buddha nature, recognizing Buddha nature. The Buddha taught that, in the end, these things matter most. How well did you love? How fully did you live? How deeply did you let go? This exchange honors all three. As word spreads of this unusual trade, more villagers begin to approach. An elderly woodcarver named Ananda comes forward, carrying a walking stick carved with intricate patterns. I heard you trade for craft work, he says, his voice hoarse with age, but still carrying dignity. I don't have much left to offer, but these hands still remember how to carve. His words carry the Buddha's teaching about impermanence, how everything changes, including our own bodies and capabilities. The walking stick is a masterpiece of what Zen calls beginner's mind, each cut made with fresh attention, each curve discovered rather than forced. Patterns flow like water. Animals and plants intertwine in designs that seem to tell stories without words. This is extraordinary, Sucha says, examining it closely. How long have you been carving? 60 years, Ananda replies. Started when I was a boy helping my father. My father taught me, his father taught him. Back 3 generations, maybe more. His eyes grow distant with memory. But nobody wants hand-carved things anymore. Everything is faster, to make with tools and molds. Here is the suffering that comes from attachment to the world staying the same, to our skills remaining relevant. There's profound sadness in his voice, the grief of someone who has watched his life's passion become irrelevant. You recognize this as dukkha, the first noble truth, the suffering that comes from impermanence and change. But embedded in his words is also the beauty of Dharma transmission, how wisdom passes from teacher to student across generations. The world may not want hand-carved beauty, Sucha replies, but the world needs it. He continues examining the stick with genuine wonder. The Buddha taught that 3 things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. Your carving reveals truth, the truth that human hands guided by patient hearts can create beauty that machines cannot. He traces one of the carved birds with his finger. This will outlast a dozen mass-produced ones. More importantly, it carries what Zen calls mind essence, the consciousness of the maker transmitted through matter. You watch tears gather in the old man's eyes. Someone has just offered him what Buddhist psychology calls right view, seeing his work not as obsolete, but as precious Dharma expression. Your skill isn't obsolete, it's endangered. And that makes it more precious, not less. Sutra continues. Each piece you create is a teacher, showing the world what happens when right concentration meets right effort. What would you want in exchange for such artistry? Sutra asks. I'm old, Ananda says. I don't need much for myself. But my granddaughter is getting married next season. I'd hoped to buy her something special, something that would last. His words embody the Buddhist understanding of interdependence, how our joy is connected to the joy of those we love. From his cart, Sutra retrieves a set of silver bangles, simple but beautifully made. These were crafted by a silversmith in the mountains. He follows the Buddha's teaching about right livelihood, working slowly, mindfully, ensuring each piece serves the highest good. He places them beside the walking stick. Masterwork for masterwork, both expressions of what happens when skill meets compassion. The day continues with a steady stream of such exchanges. Each transaction becomes a teaching about Buddhist principles in action. A woman named Kamala brings bread, made with techniques passed down through generations, demonstrating what the Buddha called skillful means, adapting ancient wisdom to present needs. A young man named Devak offers to repair cartwheels using methods his grandfather taught him, showing how Dharma transmission works through practical skills, not just spiritual teachings. Each interaction follows the same pattern. Sutra recognizes not just the utility of what they offer, but the Buddha nature expressed through their creation. But something even more significant begins to happen as the morning progresses. The villagers start to linger after their trades, demonstrating what Buddhist community, Sangha, looks like when it forms naturally. They sit near the well, talking quietly among themselves. Children play games they haven't played in weeks, their laughter expressing the joy that the Buddha said was our natural state. Elders share stories they haven't told since before the betrayal, transmitting Dharma through narrative. It's as if being valued for their individual gifts has helped them remember what the Buddha taught about interdependence, how each person's awakening supports everyone's awakening. You witness conversations that embody right speech, words that heal rather than harm. An old woman teaching a young girl the proper way to select grain, passing down what Zen calls grandmother mind, practical wisdom infused with love. A father showing his son how to judge the quality of wood, demonstrating how mindfulness applies to every aspect of life. The web of interdependence that had been damaged by betrayal is reweaving itself according to Dharma principles. This is when the most significant encounter of the day arrives. You notice him approaching from the road, a figure moving differently than Sucha did. Where Sucha walked with what Zen calls unhurried urgency, this man moves with agitated energy. His cart is painted with bright colors that seem to shout for attention, violating the Buddhist principle of moderation. This is Gahapati, and his return represents a test of everything the village has learned about right response. The change in atmosphere is immediate and dramatic. Conversations stop mid-sentence as people recognize the approaching figure. Children are called to their mothers' sides. The easy warmth around the well evaporates like mist in sunlight. Here is the source of their pain, and their reaction shows what the Buddha meant when he taught about the power of past karma, how our actions create consequences that ripple through time. Gahapati approaches with his familiar swagger, but uncertainty flickers in his eyes. He expected to find the same wounded, wary village he left behind. Instead, he finds people gathered peacefully around another merchant's cart. This isn't the reception he was prepared for, and you can see him struggling with what Buddhist psychology calls cognitive dissonance, when reality doesn't match our expectations. Well, he calls out, his voice carrying forced joviality that rings hollow. I see you found someone else to entertain you. I hope he's treating you better than you deserved last time. His words violate multiple principles of right speech. They're neither kind, nor true, nor helpful. The casual cruelty reveals someone still trapped in what Buddhists call wrong view, seeing others as objects rather than fellow beings. Sucha rises slowly from his place by the well. There's no aggression in his movement, no defensive posturing. He embodies what the Zen masters call immovable wisdom, remaining centered regardless of external circumstances. Welcome, fellow merchant, he says calmly. The road is long. You must be tired. This response demonstrates the Buddha's teaching that hatred does not cease through hatred. Hatred ceases through love. This is an eternal law. This greeting clearly confuses Gahapati. He was prepared for hostility, for competition, for what Buddhist economics calls scarcity thinking, the belief that there isn't enough for everyone. Instead, he's met with what the Buddha called loving kindness, goodwill offered without condition. I'm not tired, Gahapati snaps defensively. I'm here to reclaim my customers. These people were mine before you arrived. His words reveal what Buddhism identifies as one of the root causes of suffering, the illusion of ownership. People belong to themselves, Sucha replies gently. They choose where to place their trust. You cannot reclaim what was never yours to own. This response embodies the Buddhist teaching about non-attachment, understanding that trying to possess or control others leads inevitably to suffering. Gahapati's face flushes with anger. You think you're better than me with your simple clothes and humble cart. But I know merchants like you. You're just better at hiding your greed. What's your real game? His accusation reveals what Buddhist psychology calls projection, assuming others share our own motivations. I want the same thing you do, Sucha says. But I want it for everyone. I want prosperity, safety, satisfaction. He pauses, embodying the Buddha's teaching about right intention. The difference is that I've learned you can't achieve lasting prosperity by taking it from others. True wealth grows when it's shared. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught about merit, that wholesome actions benefit both the doer and the receiver. Shared wealth. Gahapati laughs harshly. Pretty words. But you still have goods to sell and coins to earn. How is that different from what I do? His challenge reveals someone still trapped in what Buddhism calls dualistic thinking, seeing only profit or loss, winning or losing. Would you like to see? Sucha asks simply. This question embodies what Zen calls direct pointing, teaching through demonstration rather than explanation. He walks to his cart and begins unpacking his wares, but instead of arranging them for visual impact, he groups them by the Dharma stories of their creation. This bowl was fired by a potter who practices right livelihood, working with patience, ensuring quality, harming no one in the process. This cloth was dyed with berries gathered by children who sang while they worked, infusing it with joy. You realize what Sucha is demonstrating through this display. He's showing how commerce can embody Buddhist principles, how buying and selling can become expressions of interdependence rather than exploitation. When people buy these things, he continues, they're not just getting tools or decoration. They're participating in what the Buddha called the web of interdependence, supporting the entire network of beings who contributed to each item's creation. This teaching reveals the Buddhist understanding of right livelihood, work that serves the well-being of all beings, rather than just the individual. Every purchase becomes what Buddhism calls skillful action, a choice that either increases suffering or increases happiness in the world. Gahapati stares at the displayed goods, struggling to understand this different approach. His worldview is built on what Buddhist economics identifies as scarcity consciousness, the belief that for him to win, others must lose. But here's someone operating from abundance consciousness, understanding that true prosperity comes when everyone benefits. You're naive, Gahapati says finally, but his voice lacks conviction. People are selfish. They only care about themselves. Someone always gets cheated. Some people act selfishly. Sucha agrees. But the Buddha taught that all beings possess Buddha nature, the inherent capacity for wisdom and compassion. Even selfish people can awaken to see that their own well-being is connected to everyone else's well-being. He looks directly at Gahapati with compassion rather than judgment. The question isn't whether people are naturally good or bad. The question is which seeds we water with our words and actions. As this confrontation unfolds, something extraordinary demonstrates the power of Sangha, Buddhist community. The villagers don't flee or hide. Instead, they begin to gather closer, their presence creating what Zen calls protection through witness. They're embodying the Buddha's teaching about collective courage, how individual awakening strengthens when supported by awakened community. A small child breaks free from her mother's protective grip and approaches Gahapati. It's Mira, the girl who first questions Sucha with such directness. "Are you the merchant who sold my brother's sandals that fell apart?" she asks. Her words carry what Zen calls beginner's mind, seeing clearly without the filters of adult politeness or fear. Gahapati looks down at her, and for a moment his swagger falters. "Those sandals were fine," he says defensively. "Your brother must have mistreated them." But faced with the clear eyes of a child, his justifications sound hollow even to himself. "He wore them once," Mira replies. "To temple. They broke before we got home." She tilts her head, studying him with frank assessment. "Why would you sell things that break so easily?" Her question embodies what the Buddha called right inquiry, seeking truth without malice. This question, asked without anger or judgment, strikes deeper than any adult accusation could. In the face of such innocent directness, Gahapati's defensive structures begin to crumble. Children, the Buddha taught, are natural Dharma teachers because they haven't yet learned to hide truth behind social conventions. Sucha steps gently between them, embodying what Buddhist psychology calls skillful intervention. "Sometimes people make choices they're not proud of," he says to Mira. "Sometimes they forget that every person they meet is someone precious." He looks at Gahapati with loving kindness, goodwill that includes even those who have caused harm. But the Buddha taught that people can always choose differently. Awakening is always possible. The crowd holds its collective breath. This is what Buddhists call a Dharma moment, when conditions align for potential awakening. Gahapati can double down on his defensiveness, remaining trapped in what the Buddha called ignorance. Or he can do something that Zen teaches is always possible, admit his mistakes, and choose differently. Gahapati starts, then stops. His shoulders sag as if a heavy burden is finally being acknowledged. "The sandals were poorly made," he admits quietly. "I knew they wouldn't last. I sold them anyway because I needed the money." He looks at Mira, then at the gathered villagers. "I'm sorry." These words represent what Buddhism calls right acknowledgement, taking responsibility without excuses or blame. The silence that follows carries what Zen masters call pregnant emptiness, space filled with possibility. The villagers don't immediately respond with forgiveness. Buddhist wisdom teaches that trust, once broken, heals through consistent right action, not just words. But something fundamental has shifted. The possibility of redemption has entered the space. Sucha approaches Gahapati with a question that embodies the Buddhist principle of fresh start, understanding that every moment offers opportunity for new choices. "What would you like to do now?" he asks. Not what he should do according to others' expectations, but what his own awakening heart wants to do. "I want to make it right," Gahapati says. And for the first time, his voice carries what the Buddha called right intention, motivation arising from wisdom rather than selfishness. "But I don't know how. I don't have money to repay everyone. I don't have replacement goods." "What do you have?" Sucha asks. This is the same question he asks everyone, because Buddhist teaching holds that every being has Buddha nature, something valuable to offer. Even people who have made terrible mistakes possess the capacity for wisdom and service. Gahapati looks down at his hands, perhaps seeing them clearly for the first time. "I have skill in trading," he says slowly. I know routes between villages which crafters make quality goods, which merchants can be trusted. He pauses, recognizing the irony. I know which ones can't be trusted too. Knowledge can be a form of dana, generous giving, Sucha observes. You could help other communities avoid the mistakes you made. You could use your experience to protect others from dishonest merchants. The Buddha taught, the mind is everything. What you think you become. Transform your knowledge of deception into wisdom that protects others. This suggestion opens what Buddhists call the path of redemption, understanding that past harmful actions can be balanced through future helpful actions. Gahapati's eyes widen as he grasps this possibility. You mean I could use what I've learned about cheating people to help them avoid being cheated? As the sun begins to set on this remarkable day, you witness something profound. A community that began wounded and suspicious has rediscovered its strength through Buddhist principles of interdependence and compassion. A merchant who came seeking profit has found purpose in right livelihood, and another merchant who came seeking to exploit has encountered the possibility of transformation through right action. The villagers begin to disperse as evening approaches, but they don't scatter hurriedly. They linger, making plans to continue conversations tomorrow. Speaking of projects they want to work on together, dreaming of festivals and markets and ways to share their gifts with the wider world. This is what Sangha looks like, community bound together by shared commitment to Dharma principles. Gahapati remains by his cart, no longer swaggering, but not slinking away either. He's beginning the hard work of facing who he's been and deciding who he wants to become. Sucha approaches him one final time. Change is possible, he says simply, but it requires patience with yourself and the willingness to measure success differently than you have before. As night falls over the village, you rest with the profound teaching of this day. You've witnessed healing that goes beyond individual wounds, to touch the very fabric of community. You've seen how Buddhist principles, right speech, right action, right livelihood, can transform ordinary commerce into spiritual practice. You've learned that transformation is possible for everyone, victims and perpetrators alike. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught about compassion, not passive acceptance of harm, but active choice to see the potential for awakening in every being, even in those who have caused the most pain. The stars emerge overhead, ancient witnesses to countless human dramas. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities to practice these teachings. But tonight, you sleep, knowing that you've witnessed something rare and precious. The alchemy by which suffering transforms into wisdom through the application of Dharma principles. The miracle by which broken trust becomes stronger community when met with right understanding. The hope that lives in every human heart, waiting for the right conditions to flourish according to the Buddha's timeless teachings. The third morning arrives like a whispered promise. You wake not to the sound of roosters, but to something more beautiful, the gentle murmur of human voices, already gathered by the well. People have risen early, not from habit or necessity, but from something deeper. The same pull that draws you from sleep, the magnetic quality of transformation in motion. As you approach the village square, you feel it immediately. The air itself has changed. Where once there was the brittle tension of broken trust, now there's something softer, more alive. Like the difference between a house that's been empty and one where people are finally home. The Buddha taught that drop by drop is the water pot filled. Likewise, the wise person, gathering it little by little, fills themselves with good. And this is what you're witnessing, a community filling itself with goodness, one small act at a time. The transformation isn't dramatic or sudden. It's the quiet revolution that happens when people remember who they really are underneath their fear. You find Sucha where you left him, but he's no longer the lone figure by the well. A natural circle has formed around him, not of customers waiting to trade, but of people who simply want to be near, this quality of presence. Mira sits cross-legged beside him, working on a small piece of clay pottery. Her grandmother Kamala is teaching another child how to test fabric for quality. Ananda the woodcarver is showing a young man the proper way to hold a carving knife. This is what healing looks like, not the absence of wounds, but the presence of care flowing freely between people. But the most remarkable sight is Gahapati, the merchant who arrived yesterday with swagger and defensiveness, now sits slightly apart from the main group, but clearly within it. His bright, shouting cart has been repainted overnight, simple earth tones that don't demand attention. He's helping a young mother examine a piece of cloth, pointing out signs of quality with the expertise he once used for deception. "See how the threads are woven," you hear him say. "When they're this tight, and even the fabric will last for years. But if you see loose weaving here," he shows her what to avoid. His voice carries something new, humility mixed with genuine desire to help. This transformation embodies what Buddhist psychology calls the turning around, the moment when karma shifts from creating suffering to creating benefit. You recognize this from your own life, those pivotal moments when you chose to respond differently to an old pattern, when you decided to help instead of compete, to listen instead of defend, to trust instead of suspect. It never feels dramatic in the moment. It just feels like finally breathing freely after holding your breath for too long. A new visitor approaches the village, a traveling monk in simple robes, his presence immediately recognizable to those who understand such things. His name is Sariputta, though you won't learn this until later. He's one of the Buddha's foremost disciples, known for his wisdom and compassion, but he doesn't announce himself or seek special attention. He simply joins the circle by the well like any other traveler seeking rest. Sucha recognizes him immediately and bows respectfully. "Venerable Sir," he says quietly, "you honor us with your presence." But Sariputta waves away the formality. "I am simply a fellow traveler on the path," he replies. "I heard there was something remarkable happening in this village. People speaking of a merchant who trades in trust rather than goods." His eyes take in the scene, the easy interaction between former strangers, the children learning alongside elders, the ex-deceiver now teaching others to avoid deception. "I see the reports were accurate." You watch as Sariputta observes without judging, listens without correcting, simply allows himself to be present to what's unfolding. This is what the Buddha called right mindfulness, in its purest form, paying attention to what is, without immediately trying to change or improve it. It's a quality you can cultivate in your own life, this ability to witness transformation without needing to control it. How often do you try to rush your own healing, to force breakthroughs instead of allowing them to emerge naturally? How much anxiety comes from believing you should be further along than you are? What I see here, Sariputta says softly, is living Dharma, not teachings spoken, but teachings embodied. Not philosophy discussed, but wisdom practiced. He looks around the circle. The Buddha often spoke of right livelihood, work that harms none and benefits all. But here I see something even more precious, right community, where each person's awakening supports everyone else's awakening. Mira looks up from her clay work, her young face serious with concentration. "Venerable Sir," she says, using the respectful address she's heard the adults use, "is it true that the Buddha says everyone can become enlightened?" The question comes from genuine curiosity, not theological interest. This is what children do, cut straight to the heart of what matters. Sariputta smiles, the warm expression of someone who delights in sincere questions. The Buddha teaches that all beings possess Buddha nature, he explains in simple terms. Like a seed that contains the whole tree, each person contains the possibility of complete awakening. He picks up a small stone from beside the well. This stone looks solid and unchanging, but it's actually made of countless tiny particles, constantly moving. In the same way, what seems like a fixed self is actually a flowing process of thoughts, feelings, and experiences. He sets the stone down gently. When we understand this flowing nature, we stop trying to protect something that was never solid in the first place. That's when true freedom begins. You feel this teaching landing in your own chest, like a key turning in a lock. How much of your daily stress comes from trying to protect and maintain an image of yourself? The successful person, the good parent, the competent worker, the spiritual seeker. What if all these identities are just flowing processes, not fixed things that need defending? What if the anxiety about not being enough comes from trying to make permanent what was always meant to be fluid? What relief might come from letting yourself be a flowing process rather than a fixed achievement? Gahapati has been listening to this exchange with growing amazement. "Venerable Sir," he says hesitantly, "I've done terrible things. I've cheated people, lied to them, taken advantage of their trust. Can someone like me really change?" His voice carries the weight of genuine remorse. But underneath it, you hear something else, the first tender shoots of hope. The Buddha taught that what we are today comes from our thoughts of yesterday, and our present thoughts build our life of tomorrow, Sariputta replies. You cannot change what you've done, but you can transform what you do next. Every moment offers a fresh beginning. He looks directly at Gahapati with eyes that hold no judgment, only compassion. Your past actions created suffering. Your future actions can create healing. The same energy that was used to deceive can be redirected to protect others from deception. This teaching reveals something profound about the Buddhist understanding of karma. It's not a cosmic punishment system, but a recognition that every action has consequences. More importantly, it's an invitation to conscious choice. You think about your own life, the patterns you've repeated without thinking, the ways you've responded to stress, to disappointment, to fear. What if each moment really does offer a fresh beginning? What if transformation is always available, not as a distant goal, but as a present choice? What if the voice in your head that says, "I'll never change," is just an old program running, not an eternal truth? Old Kamala stands up slowly, her weathered hands brushing dust from her simple dress. "I want to share something," she says, her voice carrying the authority of years lived fully. The circle grows quiet, sensing that something important is about to be spoken. "When that first merchant came and cheated us, I felt something die inside me. Not just trust in merchants, but trust in my own judgment. I started questioning everything. Had I been a fool my whole life? Was kindness just naivety? Should I become hard and suspicious to protect myself?" Her words resonate through the circle like stones dropped in still water. Everyone here has felt this same doubt after betrayal. You recognize it from your own experience. Those moments when someone's dishonesty makes you question not just them, but your entire way of being in the world. The terrible moment when you wonder if goodness is just weakness. If trusting people is just setting yourself up to be hurt. But watching these past few days, Kamala continues, I've remembered something important. One person's dishonesty doesn't prove that dishonesty is the rule. One bad experience doesn't erase a lifetime of good ones. She looks around the circle, her eyes bright with recovered wisdom. The Buddha teaches that wisdom lies in the middle way, not blind trust, but not cynical suspicion either. We can remain open while being discerning. We can stay kind while being wise. Sariputta nods approvingly. This is right understanding in action, he observes. The middle way between the extremes of naive trust and defensive cynicism. When we're hurt, the natural reaction is to swing to the opposite extreme. But wisdom finds the balance point, the place where we can engage with life fully while maintaining appropriate boundaries. This teaching speaks directly to a modern dilemma you face constantly. How to stay open in a world that sometimes seems intent on taking advantage of openness. How to maintain genuine kindness without becoming a doormat. How to trust your judgment after making mistakes. The answer isn't to become harder or more guarded. It's to become more skillful, maintaining an open heart while developing a wise mind. Learning to trust your intuition while also paying attention to red flags. Understanding that wisdom and compassion aren't opposites but partners. A commotion at the edge of the village draws everyone's attention. A small group of people is approaching, merchants from other villages who have heard rumors of something unusual happening here. They come not to trade immediately, but to investigate, to see if the stories they've heard could possibly be true. Stories of a village that had learned to transform conflict into cooperation. Of people who had turned betrayal into wisdom. Of a place where commerce had become community. The lead merchant, a middle-aged woman named Sumana, approaches with the cautious optimism of someone who has been disappointed before. "We've heard remarkable things," she says to the gathered circle. "People say there's a village here where merchants and customers trust each other, where trade is fair and honest. Forgive me, but in my experience, such places exist only in stories." Sucha rises to greet the newcomers, but before he can speak, something beautiful happens. The villagers themselves begin to respond. Mira stands up with her little clay pot. "It's true," she says simply, "but not because everyone here is perfect. Because we learned to be honest about our imperfections." She holds up her pot, which is clearly the work of a beginner, uneven, slightly lopsided, but made with obvious care. "This isn't the best pot in the world, but it's the best pot I could make. And that's enough." This simple statement embodies one of the deepest teachings of Zen Buddhism, the beauty of authentic effort over perfect results. You feel tears prick your eyes as you recognize how rarely you allow yourself this same compassion. How often you judge your efforts by impossible standards instead of celebrating genuine attempts. How much suffering comes from believing you need to be perfect before you can be worthy. Gahapati steps forward, his transformation evident in every movement. Gone is the swaggering salesman, replaced by someone humbled by his own capacity for harm and amazed by his capacity for healing. "These people have every reason not to trust merchants," he says to Sumana. "I gave them that reason. I cheated them, lied to them, exploited their kindness." His voice doesn't hide from this truth, but doesn't wallow in it either. "But they've shown me something incredible, that transformation is possible if you're willing to face what you've done and choose differently." He turns to address the entire gathering. "I want to make a promise to all of you," he says. "Not just words, but actions. I'm going to spend the next year traveling between villages, teaching people how to recognize dishonest merchants, how to test goods properly, how to spot false promises, how to protect themselves from people like I used to be." His voice grows stronger with each word. "I can't undo the harm I've caused, but I can prevent it from happening to others." The Buddha taught that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. But here you're witnessing the opposite transformation, how releasing anger can free everyone involved. How forgiveness isn't about condoning harmful behavior, but about refusing to let that behavior continue, defining the relationship. Sariputta addresses the visiting merchants directly. "What you're seeing here isn't magic," he explains. "It's the natural result when people choose to practice the Buddha's teachings in daily life. Right speech that builds trust instead of tearing it down. Right action that considers the well-being of all involved. Right livelihood that creates value for everyone in the exchange." He pauses, letting this sink in. These aren't just spiritual ideals. They're practical guidelines for creating the kind of world we all want to live in. Sumana looks around the circle, seeing the easy interactions, the children learning alongside adults, the former adversaries now working together. "How do we create this in our own communities?" she asks. How do we start when trust has already been broken? You start with yourself, Kamala replies, before anyone else can speak. You can't control whether others will be honest, but you can control whether you will be. You can't force others to trust, but you can become trustworthy. You begin where you are, with what you have, doing what you can. She looks directly at Sumana. And you accept that change takes time. Trust is built in drops and lost in buckets, as my grandmother used to say. But it can be rebuilt, drop by drop, choice by choice. This wisdom speaks to something you struggle with in your own life. The impatience with slow progress, the desire for immediate results. Whether it's healing a relationship, changing a habit, or developing a skill, the modern world trains you to expect instant transformation. But real change happens at the pace of seasons, not software updates. What relief might come from accepting the natural rhythm of growth, from measuring progress in tendencies rather than moments, from understanding that setbacks aren't failures, but part of the process. As the day progresses, something remarkable begins to happen. The visiting merchants don't just observe, they participate. They share their own experiences of betrayal and recovery. They offer their skills to help solve problems. They begin to form the same kind of connections that had transformed this village. You realize you're witnessing how healing spreads, not through preaching or persuasion, but through demonstration. When people see authentic transformation in action, they naturally want to participate in it. When they experience genuine community, they begin to believe it's possible in their own lives. A woman from the visiting group approaches Gahapati with obvious nervousness. "I need to tell you something," she says quietly. 3 seasons ago, a merchant came to our village. He sold us oil lamps that wouldn't light properly. The description sounds like it might have been you. Her voice wavers between accusation and question. Gahapati's face goes pale, but he doesn't flinch or make excuses. "Yes," he says simply. "That was me. I remember your village. I remember cutting the oil with water to make it go further." He looks directly at her, meeting her pain with his own. "I'm sorry. I know those words can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that I see the harm I caused. And I'm committed to spending the rest of my life preventing others from causing similar harm." The woman stares at him for a long moment. You can see the struggle playing out on her face, the old hurt warring with the evidence of genuine transformation before her. Finally, she speaks. "I came here angry," she admits, "ready to demand compensation, to make you pay for what you did. But seeing you now, seeing this place, I don't know what to do with my anger anymore." Sariputta gently intervenes. "Anger served its purpose," he observes. "It protected you, motivated you to seek justice. But now it has brought you to a place where something more than justice is possible. Healing is possible. Transformation is possible. The question isn't whether you should let go of your anger. The question is what you want to do with the space that opens up when anger naturally dissolves." This teaching reveals something crucial about emotional healing. You don't have to force yourself to forgive or let go. You don't have to pretend you're not hurt or angry. Instead, you can create conditions where healing happens naturally, where anger transforms, not because you should let it go, but because something more interesting becomes possible. Like a child who drops a toy not because they're told to, but because they've discovered something more fascinating. The healing happens not through force, but through attraction to something better. The woman looks at Gahapati, then at the thriving community around her. "What would you do?" she asks him. "If you were me, how would you handle this situation?" "I would do exactly what you're doing," Gahapati replies. "I would feel the anger and let it be there. I would acknowledge the harm and refuse to pretend it didn't matter. And then I would ask myself, what would actually serve the highest good of everyone involved?" He pauses, considering carefully. Punishment might feel satisfying in the moment, but it wouldn't help your village avoid future deception. Education might. Prevention might. Building the kind of community that naturally protects itself through wisdom rather than walls, that might serve everyone. You feel the profound truth of this approach settling into your bones. How often do you get stuck in cycles of blame and resentment, focusing so much on who was wrong that you miss opportunities to make things right? How much energy goes into proving you were hurt instead of healing the hurt? What if the question shifted from, "How do I make them pay?" to, "How do I make sure this doesn't happen again?" What if justice looked more like prevention than punishment? What if healing communities mattered more than satisfying individual anger? As evening approaches, the two groups of merchants begin making plans to travel together. They want to visit other villages, sharing what they've learned about building trust and preventing deception. They speak of creating a network of communities committed to honest trade, of teaching each other practical skills for discerning quality and character. What started as one village's healing from betrayal is becoming a movement toward transformation, not through revolution or force, but through the quiet power of example, through the irresistible attraction of communities where people genuinely care for each other's well-being. Sucha watches this planning with quiet satisfaction. His work here is nearly done, not because the village is perfectly healed, but because it has remembered how to heal itself. The Buddha taught that a generous heart, kind speech, and a life of service and compassion are the things which renew humanity, he says to Sariputta as they watch the evening preparations. "I've given them nothing they didn't already possess. I've simply created space for their own wisdom to emerge." This is perhaps the deepest teaching of the entire story. You don't need to be fixed or saved or fundamentally changed. You need to remember who you already are underneath the conditioning and fear. You need space to let your natural wisdom and compassion express themselves. All the meditation techniques, therapeutic methods, and spiritual practices in the world are just ways of creating that space, ways of removing the obstacles to the love and wisdom that are your birthright, ways of remembering that you were never broken, just temporarily disconnected from your own wholeness. As the stars begin to appear overhead, the village settles into a different kind of quiet than you've experienced before. not the brittle silence of people protecting themselves from each other, but the peaceful quiet of people who know they belong, who trust that they are seen and valued for who they truly are. Children fall asleep easily, without the anxiety that comes from sensing adult fear. Elders rest without the vigilance that comes from feeling responsible for everyone's safety. Even the night sounds seem softer, crickets singing lullabies instead of warnings. You settle into your own rest with a profound sense of completion, not because the story is over, but because you've witnessed something that changes how you understand what's possible. You've seen betrayal transform into wisdom, broken trust rebuild into stronger community, individual healing become collective transformation. And most importantly, you've experienced it not as a distant tale, but as a lived reality. Something that happened not just to characters in a story, but to you. Something that changed not just their understanding, but yours. Something that offers not just inspiration, but practical wisdom for your own journey of healing and growth. The Buddha taught that better than 1,000 days of diligent study is one day with a wise teacher. Tonight, you have been both student and teacher, learning from the wisdom of this village while discovering the wisdom within yourself, receiving the teaching while becoming part of it. Tomorrow, you will carry this transformation back into your own life. But for now, rest in the knowledge that healing is possible, that trust can be rebuilt, that even the deepest wounds can become sources of wisdom, that you are part of a human family capable of extraordinary transformation when we choose love over fear, connection over protection, growth over safety. The fourth day arrives not with fanfare, but with the quiet confidence of a truth that has taken root. You wake to find the village transformed in ways that go deeper than what the eye can see. The physical arrangements are the same clay houses, the same well, the same dusty paths. But something fundamental has shifted in the space between people. Where once there was careful distance, now there's natural closeness. Where once there was guarded speech, now there's easy laughter. You're witnessing what the Buddha called the middle way, made manifest, not the absence of caution, but the presence of wisdom. As you approach the well, you find Sucha in conversation with Sariputta, their voices carrying the particular quality that comes when deep wisdom meets deeper experience. The remarkable thing, Sariputta is saying, is how naturally it all unfolded. No sermons were preached, no rules imposed. You simply embodied the Dharma and let others recognize it in themselves. Sucha nods thoughtfully. The Buddha taught that the mind is everything, what you think you become. But I've learned that the reverse is also true. What you become shapes what others think is possible. He gestures toward the village where people are going about their morning tasks with an ease that wasn't there before. They didn't need to learn new teachings. They needed to remember old truths that had been covered over by fear. You feel this wisdom settling into your own understanding, like water soaking into dry earth. How often do you forget that your own way of being in the world teaches others what's possible? That your anxiety gives others permission to be anxious? that your calm offers them a path to their own peace, that your authenticity invites their honesty. The most profound teaching isn't what you say, but how you show up. Not the advice you give, but the example you live. Not the problems you solve for others, but the peace you maintain within yourself. A small commotion draws your attention to the village entrance. A figure approaches on foot, walking with the distinctive gait of someone who has traveled very far. As he gets closer, you recognize the unmistakable presence of the Buddha himself. Not announced by fanfare or attendants, but moving with the simple dignity of someone who needs no introduction. His arrival creates a ripple of recognition through the village, but not the frantic excitement you might expect. Instead, there's a quality of natural reverence, like people recognizing the source of teachings they've been living without knowing it. The Buddha approaches the well with the same unhurried pace he brings to everything. His eyes take in the scene, the mixed group of villagers and merchants, the children learning alongside elders, the former deceiver now teaching discernment. I heard there was a village here where the Dharma was being lived rather than merely discussed, he says with the gentle humor of someone who delights in finding truth in unexpected places. Sariputta bows respectfully. Teacher, this merchant has created something remarkable. He's shown how the principles you teach can transform not just individuals, but entire communities. The Buddha looks at Sucha with eyes that seem to see through time itself. And what have you learned from this experience? He asks. The question isn't a test, but genuine curiosity about what wisdom has emerged from practice. Sucha considers carefully before responding. I've learnt that healing happens in relationship, he says. That trust isn't rebuilt through words but through consistent actions. That transformation is contagious when it's authentic. He pauses, gathering his thoughts. But most importantly, I've learned that people don't need to be taught wisdom. They need space to remember it. The Buddha nods with approval. This is why I teach the middle way, he explains to the gathered circle. Not because it's a compromise between extremes, but because it recognizes that truth lies in balance. Between trust and caution, between forgiveness and accountability, between individual healing and community wholeness. His voice carries the authority of someone who has tested these teachings, not just in theory, but in the messiness of real human relationships. You think about your own life, the ways you've swung between extremes, times when you've been too trusting and gotten hurt, times when you've been too guarded and missed opportunities for connection, times when you've focused so much on individual growth that you've forgotten the healing power of community. Times when you've been so focused on fixing others that you've neglected your own development. The middle way isn't about finding a lukewarm compromise. It's about discovering the dynamic balance point where wisdom and compassion dance together. Gahapati approaches the Buddha with obvious nervousness. Blessed One, he says, his voice trembling slightly, I've done terrible things. I've caused suffering through my greed and deception. Is redemption really possible for someone like me? The Buddha's response comes without hesitation. If someone truly understands the suffering they've caused and commits to preventing such suffering in the future, then yes, transformation is not only possible, but inevitable. He looks directly at Gahapati, with eyes that hold no judgment, only clarity. The question isn't whether you deserve forgiveness. The question is whether you're willing to do the work of making amends. Not just saying sorry, but living differently. This teaching cuts through one of the deepest sources of human suffering, the belief that past mistakes define future possibilities. You recognize this voice in your own head, the one that says you're not worthy of love because of what you've done, not capable of change because of how you've been, not deserving of peace because of the pain you've caused. But the Buddha's teaching offers something more radical than forgiveness. It offers the possibility of genuine transformation, not erasing the past, but learning from it so completely that it becomes wisdom, not pretending you never caused harm, but committing to preventing future harm. A young woman from the visiting merchants group raises her hand tentatively. Blessed One, how do we take what we've learned here back to our own communities? How do we create this kind of transformation in places where people are still hurt and suspicious? The Buddha smiles at the question. You begin exactly where you are, he says. You don't wait for others to change first. You don't demand that conditions be perfect before you start practicing wisdom. He picks up a small stone from beside the well. This stone cannot make the whole earth solid, but it can provide stable ground for one footstep. Your practice of honesty cannot make everyone truthful, but it can provide reliable ground for those ready to trust again. He sets the stone down gently. The Buddha taught that hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is a law eternal. This doesn't mean becoming passive in the face of harm. It means responding to harm with wisdom rather than reactivity, meeting deception with discernment rather than cynicism, approaching betrayal with healing rather than revenge. You feel this teaching resonating with every relationship challenge you've ever faced. The co-worker who takes credit for your ideas, the friend who breaks confidences, the family member who manipulates through guilt, the romantic partner who lies about small things. In each case, you have the same choice this village faced. React with more of the same energy that created the problem, or respond with something different, something that breaks the cycle rather than perpetuating it. Mira, who has been listening with the intense focus that only children bring to important truths, tugs on the Buddha's robe. Why do people hurt each other if it makes everyone sad? She asks with the devastating directness of innocence. The Buddha kneels down to her level, treating her question with the same seriousness he would give to any philosophical inquiry. People hurt others because they are hurting inside, he explains gently. When someone is angry or afraid or sad, sometimes that pain spills out onto other people. It's like when you're carrying a cup that's too full, some of the water splashes on others. He traces a pattern in the dust with his finger. But when people learn to heal their own pain, they stop spilling it on others. They become like wells that give clean water instead of cups that overflow with bitterness. This simple explanation illuminates something you've struggled to understand about human nature. Why good people sometimes do harmful things. Why kind individuals can be cruel in moments of stress. Why people who love you can still wound you deeply. It's not because they're fundamentally bad. It's because unhealed pain has a way of spreading. Because hurt people, just as healed people heal people. Understanding this doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does offer a path toward prevention rather than just punishment. As the morning progresses, the Buddha engages with each person who approaches him, not as a distant teacher dispensing wisdom from on high, but as someone genuinely interested in how Dharma principles work in daily life. He asks practical questions about their trades, their families, their struggles. He listens to their stories of transformation with the delight of someone seeing his teachings take root in fertile ground. What I find most remarkable, he says to the gathered circle, is how naturally the Dharma emerges when conditions are right. No one here studied texts or memorized teachings. Yet you've discovered through experience what the wisest sages spend lifetimes learning. He looks around at the mix of villagers and merchants, former adversaries now working together. This is why I teach that the Sangha, the community of practice, is one of the three jewels. Individual awakening is precious, but collective awakening transforms the world. This recognition gives you a new understanding of your own spiritual journey. How much of your growth happens not in isolation, but in relationship. How your healing accelerates when witnessed by others. How your wisdom deepens when tested in real-world interactions. The meditation cushion is important, but the marketplace is where Dharma proves itself. The retreat center offers necessary refuge, but the family dinner table is where compassion gets practiced. The therapy session provides valuable insight, but the workplace is where patience gets developed. As the Buddha prepares to continue his journey, Sucha approaches him with a question that has been forming throughout their conversation. Teacher, I understand now that my role here was temporary. This village has remembered how to heal itself. But what about the countless other communities still trapped in cycles of mistrust and betrayal? How do we reach them? The Buddha's answer comes with the patient wisdom of someone who has spent decades planting seeds that others will harvest. You don't reach them, he says gently. You become so thoroughly transformed by what you've learned that transformation naturally spreads through your presence. You trust that Dharma has its own intelligence, its own timing, its own way of finding fertile ground. He gestures toward the group of merchants preparing to travel together. Each of these people will carry what they've experienced here into their own communities. Some will be ready to receive it, others won't. But the seeds will be planted nonetheless. And eventually, when conditions are right, those seeds will sprout. His eyes hold the long view of someone who understands that real change happens across generations, not moments. Your job isn't to convert the world. Your job is to embody truth so completely that others can't help but recognize it. This teaching releases you from a burden you didn't know you were carrying. The pressure to fix everyone around you, to convince others to heal at your pace, to make people change who aren't ready to change. What if your only responsibility is your own transformation? What if the most powerful thing you can do for others is become genuinely free yourself? What if influence happens through example rather than argument? Through presence rather than pressure? As the Buddha takes his leave, he offers one final teaching to the assembled group. Remember that what you've experienced here isn't the end of a story, but the beginning of countless new stories. Each of you will face moments when old patterns try to reassert themselves, when fear whispers that trust is foolish, when pain suggests that cynicism is safer than openness. His voice carries both warning and encouragement. In those moments, remember this well. Remember this community. Remember that healing is possible, that trust can be rebuilt, that even the deepest wounds can become sources of wisdom. He pauses, letting this settle into their hearts. The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent. Strive diligently. Your transformation isn't a one-time achievement, but a daily choice. A commitment to keep choosing love over fear, connection over protection, growth over safety. With that, he continues down the dusty road, leaving behind a community forever changed by remembering what was always true. That healing is humanity's birthright. That wisdom is our natural state. That love is the only force strong enough to transform the world. The sun sets on the fourth day with colors you've never seen before. Not because the sky has changed, but because your eyes have. The same golden light that illuminated Sucha's arrival now bathes his preparations for departure. But where his coming was marked by curiosity and caution, his leaving is wrapped in gratitude and quiet celebration. You stand at the edge of the village square, watching as people gather not to say goodbye, but to offer blessings for the journey ahead. Sucha's cart looks different now. Still simple, still honest, but somehow fuller, despite containing fewer goods. What fills it now are gifts from the village, not payment for services, but expressions of connection. Mira's clay lamp sits carefully wrapped among his belongings. Ananda's carved walking stick rests beside his own travel gear. Kamala has provided bread for the journey, baked with the same patient care she brings to everything. These aren't transactions but transmissions, love made tangible, community made portable. You're not really leaving, old Kamala observes as she watches Sucha secure his belongings. How can you leave when you've become part of who we are? Her words carry the wisdom of someone who understands that true connection transcends physical presence. The Buddha taught that thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle. What you've witnessed here is that lighting, how one person's authentic presence ignites the innate wisdom in others. How healing spreads, not through preaching but through being. How transformation happens when people remember who they really are underneath their fear. You think about your own relationships, the people who have left lasting impacts on your life. Not necessarily those who stayed the longest, but those who saw you most clearly. Who reflected back your own capacity for growth, for kindness, for wisdom. Who believed in your potential, even when you'd forgotten it yourself. These people live on in the choices you make, the way you treat others, the standards you hold for yourself. Their influence doesn't diminish with distance or time. If anything, it grows stronger as you become someone worthy of their faith in you. Gahapati approaches Sucha with something held carefully in his hands. It's a small wooden sign, simply carved but beautifully finished. "For your cart," he says, his voice humble but clear, "so people will know what kind of merchant you are." The sign reads, "Honest goods, fair prices, patient service." But underneath, in smaller letters, are words that make your breath catch, "Trust rebuilt here." Sucha accepts the sign with the reverence it deserves. "This is perfect," he says, and you can hear he means more than the craftsmanship. It tells the truth, that trust isn't something you start with, but something you build through daily choices. He looks at Gahapati with eyes that hold no trace of judgment, only recognition. Your own sign will read the same someday, when you're ready to claim that truth for yourself. The former deceiver nods, tears gathering in his eyes. "I'm making my own cart," he admits, "planning to travel the merchant routes, teaching people how to spot dishonest dealers. It won't be easy, facing the communities I've wronged. But I've learned something here, that running from your mistakes only makes them heavier." He wipes his eyes with the back of his hand. Better to turn around and transform them into medicine for others. This conversation illuminates something profound about the nature of redemption. It's not about erasing the past or being absolved by others. It's about facing what you've done so completely that you become incapable of repeating it. About learning from your capacity for harm so thoroughly that you become a protector of others. You think about your own mistakes, the things you've done that you wish you could undo. What if, instead of hiding from them or drowning in guilt about them, you could transform them into wisdom? What if your greatest failures could become your most powerful teachings? What if the very things you're most ashamed of could be exactly what the world needs you to understand? As the last light fades from the sky, the village gathers in a natural circle around the well. No one has organized this moment, but everyone seems to sense its importance. Sariputta, who has remained as witness to this transformation, speaks first. "What I've seen here will live in my memory forever," he says. "Not because it was miraculous, but because it was so utterly natural. This is how healing is supposed to happen. This is how community is meant to function. This is how the Dharma expresses itself when people stop thinking about it and start living it." Meera stands up, her small form somehow commanding attention from the entire gathering. "I want to say something," she announces with the seriousness that children bring to important moments. "Before Merchant Sucha came, I was scared to ask questions. I thought if I asked the wrong thing, people would get angry or hurt." She looks around the circle, her young face reflecting the wisdom that suffering can teach when met with support. "But I learned that questions aren't scary when people answer them with truth. And that trust isn't something you give or take. It's something you build together, like making a pot on the wheel." Her words hang in the air like a prayer. You recognize in them the voice of a generation that could grow up different. Children who learn early that vulnerability is strength, that curiosity is welcome, that community is possible. Who won't have to spend their adult years unlearning the lessons that fear teaches? The Buddha taught that what we are today comes from our thoughts of yesterday, and our present thoughts build our life of tomorrow. Sitting in this circle, you feel the weight and wonder of this truth. Every person here will carry tonight's experience into their tomorrows. The merchants will take it to other villages. The children will carry it into their adult relationships. The elders will pass it down as wisdom to those who come after. What started as one village's healing from betrayal has become a seed of transformation that will sprout in countless places, countless times. Sucha stands, his movement signaling that the time for departure has truly come. "There's something I need to tell you all," he says, his voice carrying both gratitude and solemnity. "When I first arrived here, I thought I was coming to help a village recover from betrayal. But what I discovered is that you were never really broken. You were temporarily disconnected from your own wisdom. My role wasn't to fix you, but to create space for you to remember who you are." He looks around the circle, making eye contact with each person. This is important because you'll face challenges again. People will disappoint you, betray your trust, take advantage of your kindness. When that happens, remember this moment. Remember that your capacity for trust isn't naive, it's courageous. Remember that your willingness to believe in people's potential for good isn't foolish, it's wise. Remember that healing is always possible, not because people are perfect, but because people can change. These words land in your own heart like seeds in fertile soil. How often do you forget these truths when faced with disappointment? How quickly you can slip from "this person hurt me" to "people can't be trusted." From "this didn't work out" to "nothing ever works out." From "I made a mistake" to "I always mess things up." What if you could hold on to the larger perspective, even in the midst of specific pain? What if you could remember that one person's actions don't define all people? That one failure doesn't predict all future attempts? That temporary setbacks don't erase permanent growth? As Sucha climbs onto his cart, something beautiful happens. Without any prompting or organization, the villagers begin to sing. Not a formal song with complicated verses, but a simple melody that seems to arise from their collective heart. The words are few and ancient. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free. May all beings live in peace. Their voices weave together in harmonies that speak of lives interwoven, of healing shared, of community discovered. You find yourself singing too, your voice adding to the tapestry of sound that carries their blessings into the night. The cart begins to move, slowly at first, then finding its rhythm. But instead of growing smaller as distance increases, Sucha's presence seems to expand, as if leaving allows him to become part of the landscape itself. Part of the story this place will tell about itself. Part of the memory that will guide future choices. The oxen's bells chime softly as they find their pace, the sound gradually blending with the night symphony of crickets and wind. until you can no longer distinguish between the sounds of departure and the sounds of home. Standing in the square after the cart disappears from view, you feel something shifting inside your own chest. A recognition that you too are preparing to leave this place. Not physically perhaps, but spiritually. You're carrying with you everything you've witnessed and experienced. Every lesson about trust and betrayal, healing and forgiveness, individual growth and community transformation. But more than lessons, you're carrying a felt sense of what's possible, a knowing in your bones that change is real, that healing happens, that people can choose differently, that you can choose differently. The villagers begin to disperse, but slowly, reluctantly. No one wants this moment to end completely. Conversations continue in small groups as people walk toward their homes. Plans are made for tomorrow's work, next week's projects, next season's festivals. Life returning to its natural rhythm, but forever changed by what has passed through it. You walk with them part way, listening to their quiet discussions about how to maintain what they've built. How to remember these lessons when future challenges arise. How to teach their children not just what happened, but what it means. How to welcome future merchants with both openness and wisdom. These conversations reveal something crucial about lasting transformation. It doesn't happen automatically or magically. It requires conscious cultivation, daily choice, ongoing commitment to the principles that created it. Eventually, you find yourself alone by the well, sitting where Sucha sat for those transformative days. The stone is still warm from the day's sun, and you can almost feel the presence of all who have sat here. All who have shared their stories, their struggles, their hopes. All who have discovered that the way forward from betrayal isn't through hardness, but through wisdom. Through discernment that protects without closing. Through boundaries that include rather than exclude. Looking up at the stars, you realize that this ancient well has become something sacred. Not because anything supernatural happened here, but because something deeply natural was allowed to unfold. The natural human capacity for healing, for growth, for transformation. The natural tendency of wisdom to emerge when fear is set aside. The natural power of love to transmute even the deepest wounds into sources of strength. The Buddha taught that, in the end, these things matter most. How well did you love? How fully did you live? How deeply did you let go? Sitting by this well, you understand that these aren't separate questions but aspects of the same inquiry. That loving well requires living fully. That living fully requires letting go deeply. That letting go deeply creates space for love to flow freely. You think about tomorrow, about returning to your own life, with everything you've learned here, about the relationships that could benefit from more patience, more understanding, more skillful response to old patterns, about the communities you're part of that might be ready for healing, for transformation, for remembering what's possible when people choose connection over protection, about your own capacity to be like Sucha, not perfect but authentic, not without challenges, but committed to meeting them with wisdom, not free from mistakes, but dedicated to learning from them so completely that they become gifts to others. The night deepens around you, but instead of feeling alone, you feel connected. Connected to this village and its ongoing story. Connected to all the other places where similar healing is unfolding. Connected to every person who has ever chosen trust over cynicism, love over fear, growth over safety. Connected to the great web of beings all working toward the same ultimate goal, the end of suffering and the cultivation of joy. Not just for themselves, but for all beings everywhere. As you prepare to rest, you carry with you the deepest teaching of all. That transformation isn't something that happens to you, but something you participate in. That healing isn't a destination you reach, but a direction you choose. That wisdom isn't knowledge you acquire, but recognition of what you've always known. That love isn't something you find, but something you remember you are. That peace isn't the absence of problems, but the presence of responsibility. The ability to respond from your highest understanding rather than your deepest wounds. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities to practice what you've learned. People in your life who trigger old reactions, situations that test your commitment to conscious choice. Moments when the easy path is cynicism and the harder path is trust. Times when protecting yourself seems more important than remaining open. In those moments, remember this well. Remember this village. Remember that healing is always possible. Remember that you are always free to choose again. Remember that even the smallest act of authentic love can transform everything it touches. The story ends where it began, with you, breathing softly in the darkness. But you are not the same person who began this journey. You have walked the dusty roads of ancient India. You have sat by wells where trust was rebuilt. You have witnessed betrayal transformed into wisdom and wounds become sources of healing. You have learned that the merchant of truth was never just sucha. It was everyone who chose honesty over deception. Everyone who chose healing over hurting. Everyone who chose to respond to life's challenges with wisdom rather than reactivity. It was you. Sleep comes now not as escape from the world, but as preparation to engage with it more skillfully. Dreams arrive carrying not anxiety about tomorrow, but trust in your capacity to meet whatever comes. Rest settles into your bones, not as exhaustion, but as the deep satisfaction of a day lived consciously. And in the morning, when you wake, you will carry with you forever the truth this village discovered. That love is stronger than fear. That trust can be rebuilt. That people can change. That healing is possible. That you are the merchant of truth in your own life. Trading in the only currency that really matters, authentic presence, conscious choice, and the infinite capacity of the human heart to transform suffering into joy.